All right. Well, today, very special show, Greg. We've got Doug Laux on the show. Doug, I really appreciate you for coming on here, man. It was great to catch up with you over the weekend, and thank you so much for gracing us with your presence today.
Yeah, happy to be here. That was quite a conversation. I looked at my phone afterwards. I was like, that was an hour and 20 minutes.
I
Yeah.
know, I know. I was like, oh shit, my bad. I had some stuff I had to do. I was like to my wife, I was like, sorry about that. She's like, who are you talking to? I was like, long story. Remember the guy on Netflix that we saw that I said I knew? That was him.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, I know our
Very
listeners kind of heard a little bit of an intro on you, and there's a ton we could get into. Obviously, it's the human behavior podcast, so I try to keep
right.
things somewhat in within that ballpark area. But you got an incredible career in a sense. You're one of the I think one of the few case officers who've actually written stuff about what was been happening over the last 20 years in the GWAT when you were at the CIA. But you were working there. You did some incredible work in Afghanistan, some incredible work in Syria. Just in general, I'm a huge fan of what you've done and what you've accomplished. And you wrote the book Left of Boom on your experiences, which is really cool story for everyone to check out. I'll have the links to it in the details because it not only tells some amazing stuff about what you did, and it's heavily redacted, but you can read between the lines if you know anything about the area. But it also gives sort of the personal side of things too, to what your life was like, which I fortunately got to see some of, I guess,
Now,
as we
you were going through the book scanning for your name the entire time. Like, please don't tell me that he wrote about
I don't know what you're talking about, but
that.
we yeah. So and you and I crossed paths a while back. I mean, gosh, I guess that was over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're miserable, I guess. So, but we crossed paths on some work we were doing, and so you actually had some exposure to Greg's work, which is what it is, the HBPRNA, human behavior pattern recognition analysis and stuff. So that kind of how we met, I guess. But kind of want to start somewhere for our audience because, like I said, there's a lot to get into with some of your work that we did, and it's interesting how someone like yourself, who is a no shit actual case officer on the ground, running sources and doing incredible work in Afghanistan, like so much of what you have to do just relies on human connection and establishing relationships, not just with one person, establishing a network of relationships, and really like which is exhausting just in general to do that constantly. And so I'm kind of curious. We can start wherever you want on that, but on some of the takeaways and things that you've learned throughout that about what it takes to really establish connections with people and understand human behavior and how influential it is in a sense to what it is that you did in your role, but with everything, right? Technology is one thing, but it
Mhm.
still comes down to a human being in a meeting with another human being and to having a conversation, really. I mean, so
Yeah.
it's kind of a long-winded intro around nothing, but but I think we just got to drop everyone in the grease and get going on the conversation.
Most gracious intro. Thank you. And Greg, I'm looking forward to speaking with you as well. Brian and I started out around the same time 10 years ago, and we were both instructors for Tier 1 elements. And I always heard your name, and I always heard you were the big boss. So it's
Well, the big
either,
part is correct. I mean, if we go by sheer weight, Doug, that is true.
yeah, I think slightly probably I was always behind the scenes a little scared, like, oh man, someday I'm going to have to meet this Greg guy, and he's going to know way more than me, and he's going to teach this course way better than me. Oh man. But yeah, here we are on a Zoom of types. So, but I'm happy to be here. And yeah, Brian, you said it. It was nice chatting over the weekend. I haven't talked to you in quite a while.
Yeah.
It probably was 10 or 11 years ago when we started doing defense contracting. I can still remember a lot of it. So if there's any specific items you guys want to talk about, just
Yeah.
ask and I'll expand. I don't really dodge questions, which is again why I don't do podcasts a whole lot. But whatever you guys want to talk about, just ask, and I'm happy to get into it with you guys because I do like this topic. And probably, unfortunately, I don't think enough people take it as seriously as really what it is. It's kind of just something to talk about, not something
Hmm.
to actually do. And it's something that gets trained, but not actually conducted. And it's a earmark and it's a slip of paper that says you passed the course, but then you never really did it in real life. And then
Right.
you expect to teach the course 10 or 15 years later, but you didn't pay attention when you were being taught it and you didn't do it in reality. So why are you the instructor? So I'm sure we can talk about that too.
Well,
But yeah, ask
yeah,
away.
that's actually a great kind of starting point too, because you get hey, you get certain types of training when you go to what everyone calls the farm, right, at the
Sure.
agency, and a big thing is about like building rapport with people, and you got to do, but a lot of that isn't really taught how to do that. It's just sort of said like, hey, you got to build rapport or methods and techniques and understanding, like you said, the human behavior element is integral to everything that you do. But it's not typically what I've seen, not broken down into a very usable format. You still have to go out there and do it, which I get it. Like, you have to practice a skill set. But it's like you said, either it's developed over a career or a lifetime, and then you have all this sort of implicit knowledge of how you do things, or it's taught in some manner and you kind of forget it because you don't really add to that, and people forget how valuable some of that stuff is. So I'm kind of curious to see what you think of different training that's worked and that hasn't worked, and things that you've seen work, especially when it comes to the human behavior element. We don't have to stay there. You can use whatever experiences you want, but I know it was so integral to what you did as a case officer. So like, kind of give the listeners a little bit of an understanding of what you mean when you say like, hey, this is like one of the most important things that we don't really focus on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think probably a lot of folks, unless they've been through the course, know what I was teaching or maybe what you and I were teaching. But
Yeah.
it's like, I guess what the human behavior podcast here is, the majority of what you speak about is the human relationship. Um, I went through either at a great time or a pretty terrible time because the way of doing things, by the time I was ready to do things, were already set in stone. So it didn't really matter uh, what you had learned on your own or how self reliable you were. Uh, it was set in stone, and what they were going to train you at our training at the farm was kind of already molded out because we were in the eighth or ninth year of the war by that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what has worked in the past. So we're going to hope it continues to. And this is what we're going to do for the next decade. And, just even getting out of that training, which is top notch, it really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I learned a ton, and it'd change you as a person. Um, but it still, even then, felt antiquated if it were a year old, if that makes sense to you guys. Like things have changed so drastically. This isn't 1973 Moscow. So, no offense to you if you've done that and you did a brush pass in St. Petersburg. How do I get to the point? I don't care. I'm going to Kandahar. We don't do that there. So I don't care. And then the other question was, is there any through line or any similarities to just doing the job as a whole, meaning espionage? Like, yeah, I want to go to the war zones and I want to go to the Middle East. So why are my instructors talking to me about what they did in Beijing? And
Yeah.
again, like just out of frustration, not anger, because I'm still very appreciative of what I learned and was taught, but you do get the mentality of who effing cares? Like, I don't care. Like, I don't have time for that, man. Like, tell me what it's going to be to talk to a dude in the Taliban. And reason I bring up that example, and it said at the beginning, either it was for the best or worse, is because at least there was something to build upon, and a lot of people were focused on it. that was helpful, which then made me wonder, well, what the hell kind of training are the people who are actually going to Beijing getting? And are they getting the same stuff I'm getting from the guy from 1973? Because even that, same city, great, different population,
Yeah.
not the same people, different government, in fact. So, like, I feel it probably is like that still. You guys would know better than me. I got out of pretty much doing everything government related 6 or 7 years ago. Um, but here we are. I guess perfect ending here for me to stop talking is I was in charge of the Syrian program a decade ago.
Yeah.
I know what we were doing because I was the one deciding what we were going to do, and we did nothing. I won't go much further than that. I
Y-
couldn't even write about it, but as of like yesterday, it's a totally different scenario. So, what are you training those kids who are going to go in the field? Because I was taught one thing, we did nothing. Did you teach them something I didn't know about? And that whole situation in Syria right now is so bizarre to me. I can't even fathom what really happened because I know that the dictator didn't just step to the side.
no, no.
Yeah,
And
and yeah, I won't go into that. I'm not trying to talk about
okay.
that specifically at all, but just
No,
this.
and it's topical and relevant, and I know this is the other thing, I guess, because I want to give have you kind of explain a little bit to our listeners, like what a case officer actually does and what your
Okay.
job is versus because there's still a lot of not great information out there about this stuff, which I mean, in the sense that, like, how are you going to find out what people really do? And a lot of people that are out there are talking heads, and maybe they were a great analyst or something like that, but they didn't really do some of the groundwork, or they were administrator, and they were high up somewhere, and that's kind of a completely different role from what you did on the ground as a case officer. So, and again, too, just so I don't want you to get anything that you don't want to talk about because there's different reasons, not necessarily that it's like, hey, this thing's still classified or we still can't talk about it. It's more just there's still people that don't like to have people talking about things and they get angry and they get upset and they're still in positions of power. So I'll leave it at that. But can you give it for our audience just like a basic understanding of what you were doing when you were in Afghanistan, or because you read a lot about it in Left at Boom, and it's an incredible book. But give everyone a kind of an understanding of what it is that you do and what case officer's job really is.
Yeah, a case officer, that's who's designated to recruit spies for the U.S. government. That really is what it is, and kudos to the agency because they do put that online. I don't know why the searching stops there when you can find out my pant size online somehow through somebody who wrote about it 20 years ago. But I'll even have people ask me questions on Reddit or Instagram or whatever. Hey, I want to be a super spy too, or blah, blah, blah. You get to asking, well, so you want to be a case officer? And they don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Or I'll reference I'm a case officer or somebody introduced me as such because that's the title of my book. And I'll find that even the person introducing me doesn't really know what that title means.
Mm-hmm.
And, for us who do understand, it's kind of the same thing as going, oh, he was an 11 Bravo. The three of us know what you're talking about, but a civilian might not. And so I kind of think that's unfortunately the same way it is with the agency, at least, is no one's ever typed in 11 Bravo to figure out what that meant in English. No one's ever really followed up with case officer, or they saw what it was and went, oh, yeah, and kind of just dismissed it because, I wrote that book, started writing it 10, 11 years ago, and no one knew what it meant. And especially no one knew what the term left of boom meant. I stole that from the Army, which they called left of bang. Just FYI, their manual is left of bang. I didn't want to like fabricate and take that straight from them and was like, that's clever. Left of bang. I like that. I'm going to call this book Left of Boom. Now I see like tech
Yeah.
companies holding conferences in San Francisco, the Left of Boom conference. How
Okay, so real quick on that, that was San Diego, and we were at that conference one year.
Sitting in
And
the room.
let me get this. So, guess what they were referencing? So, before the Army had it, Doug, it was with the Marine Corps and the Marine Corps' Combat Hunter program. They called Left of Bang. And so, they're up there talking about it. I had to go up to the guy who was like one of the leaders of the conference and be like, "Do you see the gentleman right there who's going to speak later today? Who says Mr. Greg Williams?" They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "He wrote the Combat Hunter program that you're all talking about." And he had no idea. This guy had no idea, which I always tell Greg, like, that's a testament to your work, meaning it's
It's gone
gone on
so
long
far.
enough that like
Exactly.
that people don't even know where it came from. So like, but he's like sitting in the room going like, are they gonna introduce me now or something? I thought I was speaking later. So,
Yeah. Well, then
it
you
was
did,
just funny.
especially Greg. Yeah. I
When
mean,
your book came out, Doug, if I might interrupt briefly, when your book came out,
please.
it spawned one of the biggest arguments because we were talking about the term left of bang, which was later stolen by everybody as well. So you know you're onto something good. And it was very, very well respected, Doug, that you chose left of boom because you were talking about something completely different, but you were talking to a bunch of operators that actually knew and had similar experiences, right? So
Mhm.
it was much the same as the fight with the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab using the term atmospherics, and they go, no, that's the air trapped around the Earth. And it's like, no, that's how you read a room. And so we got into a fight, and your book was the center point of that fight. So I hope there was a spike in I guess that would have been 2006 for your book sales. And very briefly, Brian, talking about that, I want Doug to get back to his point. Doug is talking about a period of time during GLOWOT money where anything went. And what happened is back then you had the sniper manual that hadn't been updated since Vietnam in the fall of
Correct.
Saigon. You had QAQC folks showing up to me on a range and going, you can't teach that way because it's never been done that way before. You had KOCL, the Center for Advanced Operational Culture and Learning, that I butted heads with in 2006, where they go, no, it's much better to teach these people snippets of the language because we're going to talk about culture and prepare them for missions. And then they had so many different set of standards that there was nobody. When I went to JBAD, it was like the person you were talking to is likely going to be from America, sent there to work there rather than somebody that was local. And we'd ask, can we interview a local? And they go, well, fuck no, that's out there. We're not going out there. You remember those days. So
Yeah.
I want to make sure that when people put in context who Doug is, that they understand the
Yeah.
operational constraints that you had when you were working, literally swinging 16-ounce gloves in an arena nobody had fought in a long time.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Thanks for telling me that. Sad to say, I'm not surprised.
Right.
Because it's not the first, and it's not just with tech or other government, expos or whatever. I think I saw somebody, well, I saw a couple TV shows have their sitcom like that episode name left of boom. There's some silly show on CBS that's called Navy SEALs Come Home or whatever the fuck it's called. And, and their final episode was called Left of Boom. And yes, it was. Somebody in comments goes, "Hey, Marine here." So, Brian, you'll like it. He goes, "Hey, Marine here. Uh, don't you think it's kind of weird that this is your last and final episode, yet you're calling it Left of Boom? Shouldn't this have been the first episode?" No one responds, and like there was nothing funny. I made sure
Right.
and like I clicked the heart like 12 times, which meant 6 times I unliked it, and I was like, "Oh, that's how
Yeah.
liking things works. Just once is enough." And but yeah, I was like, that guy's got a great point. It should have been episode one, but now that phrase has kind of been a throwaway term, and I don't use it to like promote my book, other than to say it's just another example of something that is now hearsay, and it's a important concept, whether it's left a bang and it's what you wrote or what we used to teach Brian. uh Kind of now is just something that is talked about, and maybe it's still taught to a degree. um, but I have friends who have just kind of gotten into it, and it's so different. I get it, the war's over and all of that, but this type of training, when you really think about it, it doesn't have to be used for espionage. It can be used in real world, everyday life.
Yes.
As a
Exactly.
civilian, I use it every day. And yeah, you can become a terrible person with this type of knowledge, or you can try and do something good. And one of the greatest quotes I heard is from uh, Jalen Rose, a basketball player. He was talking about Michael Jordan, and he's like, "This guy is so intense and was so great that if he wasn't the best basketball player in the world, fine, he would have been the world's best serial killer. Like anything
Yeah.
this guy put his mind to,
Yep.
he's going to destroy, and he's going to be the best, and that's why he was good." So, yeah, left of boom as it stands now. I used to want to email these people and be like, "Hey, do you want a keynote speaker?" Like I'll sell my book. And now I'm just like, ugh, whatever. Can this be another final episode of seals crying a tissue and come home?
They'll bring you a cake. They'll have you on at the reunion episode and bring you a cake and have you blow out the candles.
Yeah,
You see, that's
yeah,
that's exactly the argument, Doug. First of all, and Brian, I'd love to know how you and Doug met and hit it off, because I
yeah,
only heard and then read your white paper that you wrote on it, Doug. But that's exactly the point, Doug. When you start going back and uncovering facts, which really screws with people's stories, and you see how long you've been in the game, that's the problem, because when you see the other people that are coming up with these great ideas and you look and they go, well, in 2015 or 2018, it's like we were in a game long before that. So you better go back a little bit when you look at it. Would you mind giving us sort of a glimpse at how you and the 0311 in the room that
I,
the Marines use the 11
What's
Bravo as 0311, so I just want to throw a good insult.
0311?
The
yeah.
cran
Yeah.
eater in the room. How did you guys
Yeah.
link up? How did you meet? And how did you not kill each
Um,
other at the first time you met?
Oh,
um,
yeah, go
yeah.
ahead, Brian. I'll
No,
let you.
no, actually,
Come on,
I
Doug.
think it'd be better for the listeners to hear your side of events because I think it'd be funny.
Well, I can make it funny. I'll be more complimentary. Uh, it's your podcast, not mine. Uh, I think I said it when we spoke over the weekend, which again had been probably a decade since we had talked. And I said, "Hey, I won't say where, don't worry, but we both got assigned to a military base to teach I don't know, do you still teach that course, that place that we were talking about in the South
N- no, no, it's
that's been going on?"
we still teach and train stuff, so it's evolved since then, and
All
obviously
right.
we're on our own, not with that previous organization or
Right.
anything.
Well,
But yeah,
yeah. So the previous contractor had both of our names on file and hired us both on as instructors. And I had been doing it for about a year and a half after I had left the agency, almost exclusively with JSOC out of Tampa,
right.
and kind of covering, I don't know what you want to say, their operations, almost like an auditor. It was, I don't know, I didn't really enjoy it. But then I went and, taught that course with Brian, and there was, as I said, a slew of guys. There were like 4 or 5 of you guys, and I was like,
Hmm.
who are they? Like, where did you get them? Because no, for real, everyone I had met before had been the same, like structured kind of guy. Like it was, you had to be that. So they wanted a chief of station, which is a boss in CIA terms, the guy who's in charge of that country, espionage. They wanted a chief of station who had 20 plus years, and that was about it. That was pretty much the creds that they wanted. And then, I was this guy with only 7 years officially working for the agency. So I was out of place. But then I saw Brian and like 3 or 4 other guys who the same company had hired. And I was like, well, they got to feel out of place too. So I don't even think Brian and I don't think we were teaching like the same group of students at the time. I was with, who we spoke about, our Navy
Yeah.
SEAL friend. And we just started talking. And I was like, man, I want to work on your guys' team and do more stuff with you because number one, let's be honest, you guys were my age. And like
Yeah.
you had seen the same stuff I had seen and had been to the same places. And finally, I was hearing somebody teach a course not about Beijing and not about Moscow, because that was apparently all the agency had ever done, because that's all their instructors talked about. But that's what they were told to talk about, because for some reason, whoever was in charge, 0506, had decided this is the important stuff that's going to impress our students. Tell them about how you were a spy, in the Cold War. I'm like, how about you get somebody who says, hi, I just came back from Kandahar and it's
Yeah.
hot anyway, and go with that, because it's not the same thing. But yeah, that's how you and I met, Brian. And then we just started getting assigned to similar contracts without knowing it. We were talking about what the score was in a football game on a Sunday, and then Monday she'll be like, "Oh, you're on this one too, nice."
Yeah.
And we
That,
didn't really. I
that,
don't know why. We were just in a different place. We were younger and didn't really care what where we were going on Monday. Uh, but yeah, I think I came across courses with you for a matter of 2 years at least, before I stopped and wrote a
yeah.
book. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that was the best, most flattering description of us linking up at that place that you could have
Greg,
given.
he
So I
also
appreciate that.
smells.
That's the one that's going to go on record. Well, I'll say that.
So
The
editor,
heavily
drop
redacted
everything else.
version. Exactly.
Drop
So
everything else.
I have
He
my
smells.
black marker ready. It's funny when you meet the agency guys, nobody has a highlighter unless it's black.
Yeah, but they don't use it anyway because they're not like
Exactly. None of them can write like the Marines. No, that was really nice.
you
The
color.
idea is, what I liked specifically is that you guys used what you were taught and included your creative spirit and personal experiences, and that's what came across, and that's why the training worked. Because you can go to the the Spy Museum in Washington D.C. and learn everything you want to know about China and the Cold War on a tour that you guide yourself and just plug in a key and listen. And history is fascinating, but that doesn't make you a better case agent. That doesn't help you develop human sources. Merely language is not enough to befriend somebody and get them to work for you as a confidential informant. And it's not that different. War is very different, but cop work is like being deployed every day for your entire career, right? And so doing a dope caper or doing a gang caper or something like that, or RICO or OCDF caper as a cop, was what really prepared me, that and the military, for doing the work that I did. And it was different at the time only because it wasn't that lockstep, this is the way you do things, the check in the box training. And so I love the fact that when they briefed me on that place that you were going, they said, hey, send a couple of your best guys. This is going to be transformational. And I think your work and the work that Brian did really were key to making that transformation.
Nice. Thanks. I appreciate you saying that. I could tell too, as an instructor, Brian and I were talking about this on the weekend. I get it. It's a way to make money and it can be a career. But come on, man. If you really just don't care and you're just doing it as a job, go do something else for real.
Yeah.
Because your job's important. Like it's
Yep.
really, really important when you're at this type of level talking about these types of operations that very few people are even cleared to do. Not that they can or
Yep.
can't do, they're not allowed to do. They're not allowed to even know about. So when you're talking about something that obviously the government thinks is so important, they make it that secret, then if you have the privilege of being the instructor and teaching that course, man, if you're not taking it seriously,
Yep.
you expect these guys to. And you guys know, I mean, the students that I'm sure you guys have now, if they're anywhere close to the operators that I was teaching, that you got about 3 seconds,
Yep.
and that lasts
Yeah.
throughout the course. And if you're dicking off in pretend land for 3 seconds, or you're faking the funk, which they're going to know
They're
Yep.
gonna
immediately,
know.
you're done. And That's why too, eventually, right at towards the end of my defense time, I was allowed to pick who I was going to teach courses with, because the person who was assigning me as an instructor and I got along real well. And they would ask me, "Hey, is there anybody in particular?" And I was like, "Let me see who you got." And uh, there were people on there that I had worked with before, and I was like, "Okay, who are we teaching?" Okay, 0372s. It, yeah, they don't really want to talk about Belarus. So why,
Yeah.
that, like, what do you? That's not where they're going, so it just doesn't make sense. Uh, anyway, I'm sure I could bitch about that stuff till
Well,
the time, but uh, anything specific about the trip
yeah.
or whatever you
The,
guys want to
well,
talk
I kind of
about.
want to get into a little bit about your work in Afghanistan, because you did I mean you took down some pretty big IED networks and did a whole bunch of amazing stuff, and you were kind of a younger dude doing it all. And what people don't know too is when you're at CIA, like you have a lot of autonomy. You have a ton, like what you like, you kind of make your own path, make your own mission in a sense. Like you still have to report, you still have these directives and things like that. But meaning you have a lot of freedom to go. This is what we're gonna do, and this is how we can do this. And but I'm curious, man, because you I think you speak or spoke Pashto, and kind of had to work with these folks and get to know them. So what you know can you walk us through sort of that process and how it worked and what you had to do to get in with people and establish relationships and then build in a network that allowed you to take down some really really big stuff that was killing a lot of U.S. troops. I mean, that's the thing, is like these are
Yeah.
bad dudes, and they're getting a lot of this. But meaning you had to go to these meetings, you had to talk to people, talk to village elders, talk to random people. Like how did you do that? Especially growing up, you're a Midwestern guy, I'm from the Midwest, so is Greg. Like, you go there, and I know you get all the training and you get language training, you have some experience, but it's still it's such a different world in a sense. So how did you find that way to assimilate and build those relationships? What worked for you?
Well, I would say that's something most relevant to what you guys are doing right now. And something you can't forget, the agency is still part of the federal government. So it
Right.
still has all the federal restrictions. It's not quite as restrictive as the military can be, especially when it comes to rules and playing by them and enforcing them. And, you guys knew I was going to be honest when I came on here. So I won't disguise if I found a problem with some things, but one thing I certainly noticed more than anything, both in the field and as an instructor, was how well and how much the military students do follow the rules, but almost to a flaw. And I get it, the rules are there for a reason, and they're to protect you and others and so on and so forth. But there comes a time where everybody's different and this person's different, and they don't fall within those guidelines. They fall outside of everything you've ever seen or heard, because no one has ever met anyone like that before. And no one has taken the time to write about that type of individual before. So you have no background, you have no manual, you have no book on how to talk to that type of guy. Well, again, this is personal experience only, because I don't want to dismiss anybody for doing the work. I found that if it wasn't something that had been done in the past, especially with military guys I was working with from different elements, they just did not want to touch it. Not that they didn't care, because they cared a lot, but it was like, yeah, we don't. That's your bag. It was always like, that CIA can do that, and I'm like, no, but that's what you do for a living. You do that every night. This is just a different name in a different location, and it's like, we don't want to even know about it, because there were no guidelines. No one had said, yes, this is how you do that. And so for me, that was kind of the same thing. And again, just through what I went through. I don't know how the other case officers had it, but I did tour the entire country and been to most of the bases, because I did speak the language, and there was no manual. And I was there after 10 years had gone by. And if it hadn't been written about in cable traffic prior, there was nothing to reference, so we're not going to do it. There was no think for yourself, do what you think's right. You be the guy who writes how to do it then, but you have to be the first to do it. That's like anything in life. That can be business, that can be a relationship, that can be field work, espionage, totally different level. But I feel that both case officers and guys in different elements with the military conducting espionage or whatsoever shied away, is putting it lightly, from being the first to do anything because of my career. I won't get promoted, as a case officer on the GS scale, or I won't get a higher rank, or I'll get demoted, or I'll get disciplined. And yeah, you don't want to be a rule breaker. You don't just want to go full auto and run into a room, like, duh. But there comes a time where you have to go, well, there's nothing there. There's nothing that says I can, but there's nothing that says I can't. So now is the time to determine, do I take the risk? Because it doesn't say I can, doesn't say I can't. So I'm going to do it. And if I complete it and do it well, they'll go, we always knew you could do that. And now that is how it's done. Write it up. And that's how everyone else would do it. But if you F up, it will not be written about. And again, this is just my experience in agency. That's going to go eyes only because you effed up. So very, very few people, a handful of people, are going to see it, that it ever even happened, and you're going to get put on the bench. Well, as a case officer, knowing those are the repercussions of me sitting here with there is no can, there is no can't, should I do it? If I don't do it, I can probably still get promoted and I won't have to sit on the bench. There's nothing else here. This is just, well, if you fail, you're going to jail. But if you complete it, it could be good. If you don't, it's here. So I'll just not do anything and keep towing the line. I don't know if it's still that way. I was doing this 10 years ago. I know I sound like a broken record continuing to repeat that, but anyone who's maybe fast forwarded on me in the past hears me continuously say it, because what I always hated was when somebody, again from 1973, was telling me this is how it's done. No, that's how it was done. So that's how it was done for me. I don't know if that's still how it is done, but that was a serious problem and a serious issue for me, not having anything in my background and kind of not wanting to be the guy to create it. The
Yeah.
book that I wrote is all about me creating it.
So,
That's essentially what it's about.
Doug, if I can jump in for a second here, you're a fascinating guy, and you have to understand, because you don't sometimes, how rare you actually are. Because and I'll tell you a story, so this will exemplify exactly what I mean. When people dial 911, they think the cop that's showing up was an extra in the movie Heat. They think that he's flipped the tires, fired full auto, all X-ring shot group stuff. Has been on the gosh damn bubble his entire career. And that's not true. And there's not been an alphabet agency in our country or any of the MOI or MODs from other countries that I've worked with that was that guy. They're so rare that when you meet them, you know you're in the presence of somebody that's an operator that's different than everybody else. And so a countless FBI agents you're on the glass with, and you look at them and you go, what? And you're going, wait a minute, I thought you were trained by the FBI or other agencies or whatever. And so I developed this horror story mentality because I was constantly looking for that guy. Who is this guy? Who is the one that's behind the curtains pulling the levers? There is no Oz, right? And what happens is when you do find them, when you find them in Iraq or Afghanistan or anywhere else in the world, you cherish them. And then you build a relationship with that person that lasts a lifetime because you know that they're the doer. They're not just a talker. They're not just the person that's getting promoted through the ranks. And everything that Brian told me about you, and then when I read, and then when I asked people about it and everything else, you were that guy. So the cool thing is that you're in a rare group that was on a bench that was continuously put in to play the game. And not a lot of people do that, even though they have credentials. I know a lot of people that had combat time and they never left a fob. And thank God they were there, because they volunteered for their service, and thank God they were a member of that. But you know what? Sometimes those credentials stretched a little thin, because now the war's over and now some of those people are dead, so we can talk about anything we want. But we devoted ourselves to make sure that fieldcraft lives on. It's not about me or my name or Brian or his name or the Arcadia brand. The idea is we have a certain set of skills that you can develop that help interpersonal relationships anywhere in the world. And if you can talk to somebody, if I can kneel down, sit down, squat down with you, and we can talk about something common for just a few minutes, it's amazing how many doors that opens. But you got to see that in the most extreme environments on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. Tell us how you were able to apply not just the training from the farm and all that other stuff, but your intrinsic knowledge about humans. How did you co-opt that?
Yeah. Well, in that regard, I would say it definitely took time. I won't lie on that. The first
Yep.
place I was sent to was on a 6-month tour, and it probably took me 3 or 4 months to really get the gist of what was going on, which, by the way, is still moving pretty fast.
Yes.
Let us not forget, Afghanistan's a totally different country than the United States, okay? Like, there's a lot of getting used to, and just because you speak the language, it does not mean shit, okay? So, and I was taught the wrong dialect, so I had to relearn that, which was fun. But realizing all the differences, okay, sure. Probably even after that first 6-month rip, I still didn't necessarily, and admittedly now, know what was going on, okay, with the people. And the folks that I had talked to at my first assignment, I thought were important. Because again, there was nothing to tell me they were or they weren't. Nobody else was meeting them. So maybe this guy is or he isn't. And I expected my authorities to tell me, continue to meet that guy, recruit that guy, or that guy isn't shit, dump him. But nobody was really saying anything. And it was very wide open. And so I think after that first tour, coming home, and now I'm with my girlfriend and my buddies and civilians, and I'm like, you know, in reality, it's not about the differences, it's about what's the same. Because
Great
that
comment.
same shit that I just did to get my buddy here to get me another beer, actually, not minus that beer, is what I could be doing with that guy, that Talib. Hey, I'm going to try that when I get back on my next assignment. So kind of seeing those differences and realizing, yeah, but they're still humans, like, not to get scientific, but, their brains still operate the same way. They obviously think differently, but they still manufacture the same in the same direction. And so it was, okay, this is just now inserting the proper word and substituting it for what I would have said to an American friend into now this guy's my friend. And what is it, the thing that he likes? Just enter that in. My buddy wants another beer. This guy wants what? Put it right there. Figure out what that is that he wants. Everybody wants something. Okay, probably money. Great. We've all heard that. But I think it was just the similarities of realizing, okay, either he's happy or he's sad. He's excited or he's scared. That's it. It's one of the four. That's going to be your basis of any emotion. So which is it? It's the same thing I do with my girlfriend. Is she happy or is she mad right now? Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
Just
but you'll never understand that.
taking it.
There's no amount of training in a war zone that'll prepare you for that type of relationship. So you're
I
still
didn't say I
learning those
did.
stuff. Yeah.
Did you
I
see
didn't want to
the
call
crown?
bullshit on that
Did
for anybody that thinks, yeah,
you see the crown?
right.
Yeah, I could be harnessing the emperor title if I knew how to do
That's
that.
great.
But no, in conclusion, like, it was the similarities in
Right.
that this guy, and you get taught a lot of what I'm saying. Like, you got to find out what they want, you got to know what makes them tick. I get all of that. But also, how I make you understand that I know that's what you want. And if it is just money, not make you feel uncomfortable about it. We probably, the three of us, have had friends in the past who maybe kind of were asking for something more than we wanted to give. Probably we're talking about money. And, you can tell they're asking something that's making them uncomfortable to ask. So now what can I do to show this foreigner, this Afghan, my confidence in asking him to do this thing? Well, he's got to think he's my friend, and I got to portray that, even if I think he's a piece of crap. And how did I do it with my buddy to get another beer? Well, I'm going to utilize that. And I made that guy happy. Need to make this guy happy, insert what he wants. So I switched it up. And instead of trying to figure out what the Afghans were doing in the 13th century, I looked at it and said, this is 2011. This guy sees the same commercials I get. He gets Indian TV, which is British TV, which is the same television that I get. I know he knows what I know as far as pop culture and stuff. It doesn't matter that he's in the Taliban. He still has a TV. And you learn that and you're like, whoa, the Taliban has TVs? Yes, they do. Hi.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then just seeing things like that and opening your eyes and going, it's not that hard. It
Right.
just took the patience and the time to learn this guy's still a human, and he still wants something and needs something. And for better or worse, if it's money, brother, I will not hesitate, and I will be confident when I present that to you, because I got a printing press back there and I will get you what you need if you deserve it. But yeah, that's kind of how just with my time in Afghanistan went. Much different in Syria, but building those relationships, I'm sure you guys teach the finer points of how you do that. But it was looking at it the same way. I'm going to treat this guy exactly like I treat Austin, my buddy.
That's so good.
Like, and he's gonna feel like he's Austin, and we're about to watch the movie Heat together.
Yeah.
That's so
Which
wonderful.
And
you referenced that earlier. That's one of my favorite movies.
and a lot of people like they think we give some principles like to start out at one of our training course, like a training course, right? So we just did like a 3-day one with law enforcement back in your old stomping grounds out back in Indiana, literally last week, right? And so, when we go, one of our first principles, we go, people are the same all over the world, and we give examples and go, this is what you mean. Everywhere you go, people play games. You turn into an asshole when you're a teenager. You're sad when someone dies. You wear white to a wedding. Like, there's just these and people kind of go, yeah, okay, I get it. And it's like, no. And then the follow-up, the so what to that is actually what you said is look for the similarities, not the differences. And everyone's like, okay, yeah, I get it. It's like, no, you have to go out there and practice it. That chud who wakes up at the crack of noon every day that you deal with, like, it's the same thing, and it's even at a simpler level. So don't overcomplicate it. And because everyone's got a job, a mission, a role, what responsibilities, what they're supposed to do, it's like we get so focused on our tactics, techniques, and procedures, what these policies are, what I'm here to do. It's like, take a minute, right? Figure out what's going on, where this person's at, and see, what you can do and connect at a human level. Because the rest of that stuff you can learn how to do, and the rest of the stuff with time, it'll happen. But we're not focusing on just the basic elements of what's happening, what is the dynamic here in this situation at this time right now, which is also why we miss huge pre-event indicators. We miss everything because we're so mission focused. We're trying to get done what we need to do. And then it's like, yeah, but the world and the situation, this person is screaming at you right now, and you're missing everything because you didn't just follow some basic principles of, hey, people are the same all over the world. Let's look for the similarities, not the differences. And then Because if there are differences, then they're going to stand out even more, right? If you go, well,
Right.
wait a minute, this isn't the same situation. This isn't just a guy trying to make a buck. Oh shit, I might be in trouble right now, or I might have put myself in a bad situation. You can miss those things because you're not kind of sticking to those basic concepts. You know, you're like, all right, am I using the right dialect of Pashto with this guy? Do they literally understand what I'm saying? It's like there's a whole lot of communication and information exchange going on without any words being spoken, right? And so I think because we're sort of primed as that, like, well, they got a different tribal structure and they wear different clothes and a different religion and a different this. It's like, yeah, but the Abrahamic religions are kind of similar. So there's that. Like, sure, they don't wear the same clothes, but in some ways that may, but we used to here, like, 100 years ago, you go out and you go to a business, everyone's wearing a suit and it's almost the same exact one with, okay, you might have a little bit different feather in your cap, but you're wearing the same thing. You got a different color pocket square, but everyone's wearing that same thing. So it wasn't always that different. And so when you come down to those basic elements of human behavior and just how the world operates, it makes it easier to understand if you understand the basic fundamental rules. Like we bring up stuff about physics sometimes because it's not to show like, oh, look at all this stuff going on, or look at how many different scientific words I know. It's like, look, there's underlying rules to everything, and you can't, if you're breaking those rules, you're never going to get done, or you don't recognize what those underlying rules are. You're never going to see the situation for what it is, and that's kind of what we try to get people to do. But without that, sort of those experiences where you've actually been able to do that in those places that allowed you access to people and now a network, and now you're able to do some amazing stuff. If you don't see that, I think a lot of times it's hard for people to really look at the world that way. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I would
sorry,
say
go ahead, Greg. I thought you were
no.
coming in there.
Doug, I think that you again elevated yourself to a very small, what I would call an elite group of folks, because every time I hear somebody that says, "Hey, wait a minute, let's look for the similarities rather than the differences," I immediately fall in love with them, because that's exactly how this gets done. And we've all seen a car where you drive it from the right side rather than the left side, and we've all been in countries where they drive on the left side of the road rather than the right side of the road. But when it comes down to the science, it's an internal combustion engine, and we get it. And there's a gas tank, and we know how to fill it. And there's a gear selector, and we figured that out in the ignition. Maybe you press the floor, or maybe you press a button, but it's the same thing. And so when we look at, like, very briefly, last week I told a story of Spin Bull Deck, where I knelt down to talk to a girl. We were looking for propane bombs, and she spoke fluent English. And I looked at her and I said, "How is it that you speak fluent English?" And she goes, "The Brits were here for 15 years, mate." And I go, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And she schooled me, right? But
Yeah.
you as a case officer on the ground had to understand, just like you did in your relationship and with your own family, that our vulnerabilities define us. And when you open up the trust gate and start speaking to people, even though you had an ulterior motive, because it was your job to befriend these people, there were times that you forgot that and were a friend. Which, what I mean by that is, like, if you can't truly want to trust me and be my buddy, I can't be an effective guy, because it's just like being a gigolo. Yeah, I'm going to say these three things to get laid every time and buy you this and that. And after a while, it's going to get around that you're the bar whore. I got it. So that works when you're trying to build a confidential informant as well. So there were times that you had to let down your guard to let them know a little bit about you, so you could find out more about them and be able to exploit that. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I'm sure you had that experience many times.
Oh yeah, and look, I think I said it in the book. I'll say it now. There were assets that I had who were in the Taliban that, however you want to cut this up and dice it, that I did care about. Meaning, and you can go, how could you care about terrorists? I didn't want to see the guy die, and he flipped and he realized what he had been doing was wrong. And now he was working for the US government. He signed the paperwork and he was turning over his old organization for me because he trusted me. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, no, I could never possibly care about anyone like that. No, I did. And there were several
Yeah.
guys who, like, I wanted to protect them and I didn't want to just leave them, and pop smoke and go, well, hey, thanks for what you did. Now go back to your village. Bye. So that's tough. And to some of those guys, yeah, to get them to tell me the most important stuff, sometimes they needed to at least be told something about me, whether it was true or not. And if it
Exactly.
wasn't, you got to be careful with that because
Yep.
unless you're a really good liar and can tell a story, it's going to come across phony and they're going to see it and be like, oh, this guy's a hack.
Absolutely.
Here we go again. So I probably wouldn't recommend that. If you're going to tell somebody something significant about you that's private, well, they better have earned it or you're just kind of giving it away for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, anytime that I got to that level though, it really made me reevaluate the relationship both internally between me and that other person and as well as what I was writing. Because whatever I wrote in Cable Traffic is really what happened. It's not
Yep.
what really happened, it's what really happened. Because that's what I said happened and I was the only one there. So that's what everyone's going to read, that's how this went down. Um, and that's this whole bag of hammers too. What do I write? What's going to get me in trouble? How do I stay out of this? How do I advance this? This guy is in the Taliban, but I know that if we stick with him, he'll get us to here, and we want to be here. But now we're here, and this guy can do it. But just because of some words that we're putting after his name, I can't talk to him. You
Right.
know, so the similarity is I recognize that with a lot of Taliban guys in particular. I went in with the understanding that they're horrible, they hate all Americans, and they will kill you. And some were definitely like that. But other guys were like, no, man, I hate it here. And they're just like, it sucks. Like, what do you want me to say? Like, it sucks. I'm broke. Like I eat grapes every day. That's all I can afford. Like, this sucks. And they'd open up and tell you that. And they think, we had a misunderstanding about, Afghans in southeastern Afghanistan into another country that's redacted. I'm guessing you could figure out how to travel east. Oh, wait, east is redacted. Uh, go right on a map
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
Now you found it. But yeah, we were told that those are the worst types of people. Have you ever asked them what they think about you? Have you ever asked them what they're preconditionally informed about you? Well, they don't have a portfolio like I got on them. They have television. So what's television saying to them? Well, it's saying one of the same thing it says to teenagers here. Everybody in the CIA is Jason Bourne or James Bond. So when
Got it.
I didn't come in a suit and tie, they're like, "You're not a spy." Because I look like this sitting down, or I dress in local attire, and they'd be like, "That makes no sense. You're supposed to come out of a helicopter, and then you're supposed to like shoot everyone, and then have a martini and we talk." No, so that was something you had to get through too. And for what it is worth, I don't know if I wrote about it or not. I know I've definitely spoken about it. Really taking into consideration what this person already thinks about you is something that I think you should do in real life to the extent you can as well. And I have, especially in relationships, say, for example, meeting my girlfriend's friends for the first time. What must they think about me?
Yeah.
And what has happened recently between her and I that she may or may not have talked to them about? Do they know more about me than I want them to?
Yeah.
What do they in fact already know about me or think about me? Maybe they haven't heard a whole lot, but they Googled me and they think this, and just having that idea in my head instead of, well, I'm a nice guy. They'll see I'm a nice guy. I'm nice to her. She's probably told him I'm the greatest ever. Eh. Remember how I like stubbed my toe at her house yesterday and that was a 12-hour argument? That's what they think about me.
Yeah.
That's what they're thinking about you right now, and they're not happy. So now, and then I'll shut up. That is a perfect situation leading right into what I was doing with Syria. There was a certain individual who later ran for president but did not win. You can probably guess who had a big leadership position in the United States government in 2012, who was making promises to the Turkish people about no-fly zones and things like this that were directly relevant to what I was doing on a daily basis. And when you say those things, well, then people are going to expect those things. So it started me walking into the room knowing ahead of time I got to diffuse that. And there's going to be 30 questions about where's the air support. Well, your leadership said we were getting it yesterday, and then it never happened. Oh boy. But yeah, I think if I say anything worthwhile there, it's to consider what somebody already thinks about you, whether they're right or wrong. Just because you think you're a nice guy or you're cool, uh, they may think the exact opposite. So be prepared for that if you can and handle that first. Get that out of the way before you try selling them on the nice guy thing.
That's yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean,
Incredible advice.
in your experience too, you're talking about something that happens at some strategic level that some elected official or politician or someone says, you know, and then that affects you on the ground. And, you know, I've had those experiences as well where it's like,
Yeah.
well, we thought, you know, the commander said this, and it's like, yeah, about that. Here I am, and I have to be the one that it doesn't matter. I'm, you know, wearing that uniform in a sense, or I'm the person exemplifying this entire organization or mission, and you're just one person, and you're going, fuck. How do I walk this back and still get done what I need to get done? And
Yeah.
that you know that's you know you're actually a lot of the stuff that you talk about is so relevant to the law enforcement folks that we work with
Yep.
and what their role is, because it's the same thing. It's like you could be the nicest guy, the greatest person, have an amazing record and career, but then you show up and you're wearing the same uniform, and someone saw something on the news, and that might as well have been you. It's like, well, that wasn't me, dude. And but I understand this is your only interaction, and you know, kind of it goes to, you know, also people making promises that they shouldn't be making, and saying things in general that they shouldn't be making. It's like, if you can't deliver on something, don't say that you can. Say something else, right? But you know, if you start making promises to people, or set unreasonable expectations for them or yourselves or whatever, you know, and you don't meet those, then that's all they see, that's all they know. Like, it doesn't matter how hard you're working at getting that thing accomplished, or what's happening in the background. Like, that's all they know at their level.
Yeah.
And so you have to sort of speak to that. I mean, and that can get really tough. And well, especially with your job too, what you had to do is, I mean, it's obviously extremely dangerous. You know, things could go south, and if they go south, it means, you know, you could be killed, or some catastrophic end to whatever mission or assignment that's happening, and that affects the entire area. So it's like, but again, that sort of goes back to even the law enforcement stuff. Here you are, next thing you know, you're on CNN, you know, that night with your video of something that occurred, and no one got to see everything leading up to it, right? You just got to see what happened or the outcomes of the situation, and now that's just incredible. You know, the second, third order effects can are detrimental to that whole area.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that a lot of it too has to do with folks confusing a promise and a guarantee. And you really only get one chance to screw that up,
Right.
because at the beginning, a promise is a guarantee, always. Like if you promise me something and I trust you, I'm going to believe in you. And now it's a guarantee. You told me that you'd have that to me by Tuesday. Well, when Wednesday comes and I still don't have it, you never again will hold a guarantee with your promise. Your promise is just a promise and it doesn't mean much to me. But if I can keep it so that you know when I promise you something, it's guaranteed to happen. So for better or worse, I think making a promise has become too easy for a lot of folks. So they make them willy nilly at random, not understanding that to the people they're telling it to, it's a guarantee. And so when it doesn't happen, uh, your promises kind of don't mean shit anymore. So you're kind of out of the game and you've done it to yourself.
Yeah. So one of the things you brought up, and I know we kind of talked extensively, I guess, on it. You know, we all can bitch and complain about stuff in a sense, and like you and I've had similar experiences where it's like, you know, like you said, okay, that's great, but that's not how things are done anymore, or what value does this have? I need to know what I had. I had stuff, especially with the military too, and you get this really frustration of like, yeah, but that's not working, or that doesn't work here. Can we try something else? Can we do this? And you get a lot of pushback from that, and sort of because there's just like these organizational sort of norms that are hard to get past sometimes, because one of the because when I reread some stuff from a while back, I know you had an article in the New York Times and everything, and if you're listening, I'll put the links in the details, but like, you know, one of the things that after your book came out, I guess the agency said something about it, you know, and even though you had to go submit it and they have to go through everything, and you know that's where there's a lot of black lines in that book, of redacted stuff. But it actually reminded me, and someone we know, probably know mutually, who I'm not going to say their name on here, but even said something to me about you one time. And I've kind of heard this said about me in a similar way, but they said, you know, with age and greater maturity, Mr. Laux at one point, or at one point might have a different perspective on his time at the agency. And I know exactly, like, I've had such a similar thing said to me before. It's like, well, you know, you haven't really been around much, and you got to understand there's other things at play. It's like, no, I get that this isn't about me. I understand there's other things at play, but why are we doing this? Like, I know how to go do all this stuff, but like, what is sort of this why behind all of these things? And I used to get really frustrated when someone couldn't explain that to me, or they couldn't articulate it. And they're like, oh, you'll understand eventually. It's like, well, if you can't fucking tell me, then do you not know? And that's fine if you don't. You can just say, I don't know. This is how we've always done it. Okay, that's fine. There's like, that's an answer, right? But you're showing what the problem is when you say something like that. You're showing like, fuck, I don't know. Maybe there is a better way, but we don't want to do that sometimes, right? As humans, right? We don't want to put in the extra effort, or you know, and people justify it in different ways. Well, like you said, like, well, I know if I stick to the plan, if I stick to this, I'll get promoted. I know I'll continue with my career, and you know, I've got a family and I've got this, and it's like, look, I get that. No one's asking you to say F the system, burn it down, man. You know what I mean? Like, no one's trying to like get rid of all of that great work you did. It's evolved, it's changed. Like, so how do we take these lessons learned going forward, in a sense? But we don't like get to that level. And I've had that before. So what is your experience? Because you actually, you said it earlier in the show, and people don't realize that too. It's like, you know, the CIA is still a government agency. There's still a bureaucracy. There's still an HR department. There's still, I mean, you know, there's like, it still has, you know, every other function, you know, normal administrative bureaucratic stuff that I don't care if you're at a 50-person police agency, you have some of those same things there. And so I'm curious, kind of like your take on that, because now it has been, you know, some time since you wrote the book, and probably time to reflect, and you've been doing other stuff, which, oh yeah, we even did your Netflix stuff with aliens. I gotta ask you about that in a minute here. But you know, what what, looking back now, like, what are your thoughts on that? When you hear someone say something that about you or someone else or whatever, like, what do you think now looking back?
Well, uh, what you're talking about, the comment that the agency made to the New York Times, believe it or not, was actually beneficial to me. um, and not from what they said, just that they said anything at all,
That's a good point.
because their policy is nothing. They don't have a conference room, by the way. Like, there is no daily brief from the CIA. Like, that does not happen. They just don't acknowledge you. And those redactions were made by their hands, and everyone knows that, but they don't admit to it. And they give you the paragraph to put at the beginning that says, we have nothing to do with this book. These are this author's opinion, so on. So I already had that. But the comment that they made about, with age will bring wisdom, essentially is what they're saying. And he'll
Hmm.
understand with time, is what they were saying. Uh, I think was probably meant as a dig at the time, but what they maybe didn't realize was that it was extremely helpful, because after they said that to the NBCs of the world and to the Fox Newses of the world, you just confirmed that this guy used to be a spy, because now you're directly using his name and you're saying Mr. Laux will understand what he used to do with time because he did it. So, like, I didn't even get that until the New York Times journalist told me. He's like, "Oh man, this is awesome." He was like, this is the first time ever. There's been CIA officers who have written books, mostly analysts. That's fine. But he was like, I, kind of was struggling with this with my editor and the publisher on how we confirm what you're saying is even true or not. And my response was always, well, look at the black lines. And he's like, yeah, but the public doesn't know that you didn't just do that yourself. Like, they have no clue. You could have just did that to look cool and, you know, pursue this. So when they took the opportunity to personally take a strike at me for what I had done, uh, whether I agree with what they said or not, it did help to validate me. So I'll say that. As far as what I thought about it, mm, yeah, I don't know that it was necessarily time and grade, because I did leave. I think it was just time in general of getting away from something and
Yeah.
doing something else, and then returning to it and looking at it and seeing things differently. Seeing things from not the guy with 1,000 uh, ideas on how to fix a war. Now I'm a guy who's like, is Bubbins out of cat food yet? I should probably, yeah, probably get another 5 pound bag. How's his water? Yeah, mm. Probably get on Walmart.com later. That's like the series of my thoughts in a day. So now if you bring up Syria or you bring up Afghanistan, I'm like, oh boy, okay, let's think about that and look at it. And I do think differently about some things, but it doesn't take away how I felt at the time. And I still stand by everything I said in the book. And for those that didn't like it and thought I was too young and too much of a brat, those are the same individuals I found who complain the most about me talking about my relationships. They hate it.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the most important part of what I was writing about to begin with. Because again, we're all humans and we all do that. And we all find significant others because we want to. We all want to, no matter who it is, no matter who your spouse or significant other is. I don't care. But we all want someone. And so dealing with probably what may be life's most important thing to do or care about, a significant other, uh, is going to play a huge role in any author's mind. So why not write about it? And that shit was really happening to me. And so I thought it was worth like putting that out there. Hey, you think it's cool and you're James Bond and you bang every hot chick that's ever walked by? No, most of us do have wives and kids or girlfriends or boyfriends. And that's pretty difficult. That's a whole nother topic we could spend 10
Yeah.
hours on right now. I'm sure all three of us. Okay. So I'll
Yeah.
leave that alone. But the premise of what they were saying in that remark, I think it was more just the guy that was given the guidance to say something at all to the New York Times, because that's an important newspaper, had to say something, and it couldn't be good, could not be congratulatory, like we wish him the best. You know, they had to do something. And so that came out. But looking back at that statement alone now, here, 10 years later, uh, I think about that differently. You know, it's not a dig. They were right. He will think about these things differently, but it doesn't change how I felt at the time. And that is what's most important, because I was the one with my hand on the lever at that time. So it doesn't matter what I think now. And it doesn't matter what somebody from 1973 thought when I had my hand on the lever in 2011. It mattered what I thought right then and there. And that's what I'm telling you about in the book, what I thought right there at that second. Do I push that button? So that is really critical to understand. That is why I thought that way. And that's why I did what I did. Now looking back, maybe I was wrong. And a lot of the things that I did, or maybe it didn't go as well as I thought when I wrote about it. Hey, we got the ID guy. Now I kind of look at it like, yeah, so what? That was just a good dude made for a good story. And it was a good story. So, uh, yeah, I don't know. I guess, as they say, when the facts change, I hope my opinions change. So
That's science, by
whether,
the way. And to go
yeah,
back into science on you two guys again, because I'll call you chuckleheads now. You guys forget what a small elite band of people you belong to. Most people are born and raised and die within a couple of blocks of their ancestral home. Most people never get out of
yeah,
the country. Most people never have the type of opportunities that you do, or join the military, or were in combat. So when you look back on it, and this is just science, when you look back on things, you never at that time said, one day I'm going to be the director of the CIA. I'm going to stay in the CIA for 38 years and retire from this position, and I'm going to have a desk in the D ring of the Pentagon. Brian never thought, I'm going to be Command Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and I'm going to retire with full benefits out of this. You didn't, because you were fucking booting doors and ramming cars, and you were having a great time doing it, and it was so unique that nobody you knew was into that shit. And the first time you got a taste of it, it was like fucking sucking the fentanyl. You could not stay off of that pipe after that. And we were all there. And that's why we all went back. And it is different now. But I loved your appraisal of it, Doug, because you are different and you weren't the same person. And so somebody else, without being in your shoes, and Brian, here's our argument again. If they didn't walk in your shoes and they didn't have your experiences, they should fucking hear mouth. In German, they should hold their mouth and stay in their own lane, because you did something that without that something that you did, Brian, the same way, the world would be a vastly different place. Okay. And so that little thing that you think back on now was a huge thing to the big wheel that was turning at that time. You changed lives. You met people and changed the trajectory of their lives and the direction. And that's why your book is such a powerful piece. And that's why people try to bat you down. Nobody watches a gosh damn movie and says, you see that fucking janitor back there that's sweeping up the vomit from that kid in the cafeteria as we're watching Mean Girls? I want to be that guy. I want to be the best guy to fucking mop that floor. Nobody thinks about that. And so you guys sometimes got to slow your roll and look back. And I know you are. And trust me, I'm not belittling you in any way. I'm saying you sometimes got to be proud of those things that you did do, because sometimes history is harsh, and sometimes history looks back and, oh man, if we could have gone left instead of right, but you didn't know that at the time, and you were operating under what? Unidir, unless otherwise directed. I'm doing these things right now, and that's magic. And that's why I love that fate brought you and Brian together again, and that fate also brought you back to the show, because the right people are listening to this. But I just wanted to make sure that you understand how profound those statements are that you're making when you replay this episode. I hope you hear that. But Brian, I got to hear about the alien thing, please. I
Well,
want to make sure that we understand that.
Speaking of, because you had um you've done a bunch of really cool stuff. You did Finding Escobar's Millions, I think it
Yep.
was called, or you did a show for Discovery Channel. You created and then sold to them basically, and then you've been on a few other things. But the funny thing was I reached out to you like on LinkedIn. I was like, oh fuck, I gotta look him up. I saw you on social media, and then because I came across some YouTube video. Someone sent me something. You go down a YouTube rabbit hole, then one of your video pops up. I was like, oh shit, Doug. And then I'm sitting there watching this Netflix thing with my wife, and all of a sudden, hey, we're gonna go talk to Doug Laux. And I was like, what? Wait a minute. Like I fucking know that. I'm like, oh my god, that's Doug. And of course, my wife's like, who? Wait, who do you know in this? The aliens or the? And I'm like, no, like. I'm like, oh man, this is hilarious. And she's like, I know him. I'm like, and then she's like, how do you know him? And I was like, it's a long story. Never mind. Let's just keep watching the show. So you're on this new. I think it's pretty one of the hit shows on Netflix right now. I forget the name of it, but there's so many different alien ones on there. My favorite is the ancient alien guy with the crazy hair and stuff. But what if?
Yeah.
And the big pendant.
I love that dude.
Yeah.
But you're on the show, and they have you kind of talking to these people as sort of like, vetting them in a sense, almost like, what do you think of them and what they're saying? And we were talking a little bit about this on the weekend, because my thing is like, look, I don't think a lot of these people are making up the stories that they're telling. It's just they didn't see, or it's not what people think it is. But anyway, tell us about what you're doing on the show and what your thoughts are on the show in general and aliens in general, I guess.
Well, I think it's exactly what Greg was saying just a few moments ago about most people haven't left their ancestral grounds, perhaps, is a good start to talking about the alien show. Because I was brought on by production who they know just a little bit more than like your average civilian of what espionage is. And, they've done some background research and they've Googled your name and things like that. So they get it to a degree. But, when I first came on, it was like, hey, this is what we have. So say it this way or do it this way. And I was like, look, if you want me to be on the show, I'm not going to say I believe in aliens, but I also won't say I don't believe in aliens. If you want me to tell you if that guy's a liar, I will 100% do that. Or I'll tell you I kind of believe the guy. Or maybe I think his story is full of shit, but he believes it. And that is what I found the most to be. And you guys see that in real life
Yeah.
too, where, uh, because you've been told something so many times, you start to believe in it yourself. And this resonated very well with me and again, I mean, no offense, but there's a lot of military guys who didn't do a fucking thing who go around to the VFW and the American Legion high siding like, they saved the Queen. And they were in shootout after shootout after shootout. It's like, what were you doing every 5 minutes? You guys have heard these stories to find out the guy never left Arizona and you did a 2-year bid, so like, what are you even talking about?
Yeah.
So, but they'll start to believe in it themselves from going to places like the Legion or so on. And I love the American Legion and the VFW. But thank you for your service so many times. And you're a hero so many times
Yep.
with people who don't even know what they did. They don't know what their designation stands for. And they haven't seen their DD 214.
Hmm.
And then you'll find that they just eventually start to run with the myth, that's been created for them on their behalf out of just generosity and kindness of Americans, by and large, very much value the military, but it goes over the top. And then you find the person that is being congratulated or so on starts to run with it to the point where they're the one telling the story that they heard somebody else telling about them. And you're like, wait, like this guy is full of shit. Like none of that actually happened. And so to bring it to the alien stuff that I was doing, uh, I found that a lot of people had been telling the same story for so long that they really do believe it. And I, their stories are polished, and I could tell. And so I never questioned whether the person was lying out of like trying to get something or deceive me, or doing it out of a negative idea that they have in mind to gain something from it. This is just the story they had always told. And like Greg was saying, they've never really left their hometown. And it's the same town their grandparents were in. And their grandpa believed in this story. And that kind of got passed down over the generations. So now this guy's almost at default has to believe in this story.
Right.
That's what his dad told him his dad believed in. And that doesn't have to be about aliens. I can stretch it all the way to the Taliban, or Al Qaeda, whatever
Exactly.
you want.
Yeah.
Same story.
It's
Same origin story.
yeah,
Exactly, Doug. That's brilliant. That's a great
yeah. It's your
tie-in.
it's your lineage. And so, because they did it that way, I have to do it that way because dad's still watching. But then by the time he passes away, I've already told my son this is the way to do it. And now he's watching. So, and by the way, I want to outperform dad. So you
Yep.
see, and again, it goes the same whether it was my old job or this job, seeing the original story that some of these guys were telling had not been fabricated, but had been massaged into a glorious story. And
Yeah.
each generation after made it more glorious to the point where it reached Netflix ears. That's about as glorious as you can get if you're trying to get on TV, and they got it there. And so I come in and, started to realize that pretty quick. That, hey, you guys can look into this scientifically because that's the only way I see that this could be proven or disproven. That you have to use science here, not stories. I'm sorry, this is a big deal. So, as far as that guy, I think he thinks he's telling the truth, but I think he's also just relating a story that's been told to him. And
Yeah.
if he says that he personally saw it, what he said back in 1985 when he first saw it has really advanced now into 2024. And I get it, same location, same story, but a lot more details now.
Mm-hmm.
Why weren't there more details when you were on top of it and they've kind of faded over time? Because if you ask me stories, general stories about the agency, somebody asked me the other day, like, what'd you eat every day? I'm like, did we even have a fucking cafeteria? Wait, let me think.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah. I met Hayden in the cafeteria. And then it all came back to me. But it was like, who cares? Like, I've forgotten about that at this
Yeah.
point. So, I don't know if that makes sense, but
It
It does.
does.
One way to divulge, like, I can bag on coppers, and I will hear a cop testify and immediately call bullshit because my first question is, how is it your fucking memory is so precise right now? And this case was 2.5 years old, okay? And when you wrote it,
yeah,
your memory is now filling in details that weren't even in your written report that you wrote that night. And you're on there, and the expository is going, and it's building and stuff. And that's just the nature of humans. Nobody wants to have a shit story. Nobody wants a Rolodex of your life to come up with a fucking blank card, and then all of a sudden somebody goes, I guess I was nominal. Nobody wants a meh. So that's
Yeah.
that's us. That's just human nature. And if you take it for what it's given, look, I know they saw something, but what they saw wasn't a Sasquatch. It was a gosh damn bear. And if you take it from that, then we have to rationalize everything in our lives some way, and that's why we love the scientific approach. Look, of all the things that have come and gone in my short career of 6 decades on the planet, things have come and gone. But you know what? That really good stuff has stood the test of time, and everybody can point back at that stuff. So I just want to be when they're doing the count. For me, it's going to be at hell. I think they still do a gate thing there, though. It's like Studio 54 where they got a fucking gold bar or red thing. But when they do the accounting, I just want to make sure that I did more good than bad for somebody at some point in my life. And I think, Doug, you can really say that. I think you've done a lot of great for a lot of people, and you've expanded the way people look at things. And I think that's a noble effort. I think that's a great thing to look back on.
Yeah, thank you. I can really tell, Greg, you're a club guy. So
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling
Yeah.
you, rave guy, club guy. My latest work
Yeah.
on written work was no parking on the dance floor. That'll tell you a little bit where I get my funk from. So
yeah, yeah.
Well, those the alien shows always remind me of different
wait.
stories. I mean, even especially from we had this insurgent sniper dealing with back in like 2004 Iraq, and and the stories just grow like, oh, he's like, he's from Chechnya, and he's jacked, and he's
2
got
miles
tattoos.
out, man.
Yeah, and it's like
Olympic hopeful.
well, we had, and they're all so.
Right?
They made a movie based on those stories, but there was one we were working. Greg was there for this one. We were in a place, and these guys were getting hit from some rebel folks from the neighboring country where things were going on, and they were sitting there going like, "Well, you have to understand, they come up and they can actually move the boulders on the mountain, and they can take their shot, and they can
From the
somehow
secret
lower it
base,
back down."
exactly. Yeah.
And they're going like, how do you think they would do that? And I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's a possibility, I guess. Tell you what, maybe he's a lot closer than that. I don't know. Maybe he's like right over here, and not up in those mountains a half a mile away.
And in that place, maybe he's sitting in this room, Brian.
Yeah,
we don't want to say that one.
What was the Bradley? Was it called American Sniper?
Yeah.
Was that movie where he's a sniper? So one thing I used to get so annoyed by it, but now I actually secretly love it, is to watch television with somebody about something like we used to do. And I was watching American Sniper with a lady once, and there's this scene where Bradley Cooper, which I guess they're supposed to be basing this on Chris Kyle, the actual SEAL sniper. I can promise you this did not happen. If he wrote about it in his book, I don't remember reading it. But Bradley Cooper ends up shooting the bad guy sniper in the culminating like final scene from like a mile and a half away. Okay. And my girlfriend's comment at the time was, he did it just like he was trained, right through the scope. and I thank you for laughing. But just then when she said that, I was like, wait, you really think that's like they train you to shoot the guy who's shooting at you, and you shoot him through his scope? And
Sniper schools go through a lot of scopes, Doug. They go through a lot of scopes during training.
But like to her, that's the only way it's done, is a sniper hunts other snipers only and shoots them from a mile and a half away, because that's easy. And he's obviously good because he's American, and he got it just where he wanted it to, right through the glass and everything. I bet he got glass in his eye. And I'm like, oh, okay. So
it's like one guy did that, and after he did it, 50 years ago, was like, oh damn, that was a total fucking lucky shot, and everyone went from that point on. Like, that's how those things are. When someone's like,
Hathcock story,
it's like
Brian.
I was telling you about, remember Dirk, our buddy Greg, he took me out with some of his old timer buddies one time years ago at this pub, and we're, they're all to go there, they all throw darts, and they, have their own darts, like, and we're sitting there slamming drinks, like, all right, we're gonna throw some darts. They're like, hey, you want to throw? I was like, yeah, let me go warm up. They're like, do you ever like play darts? I was like, no, it's been a while. And I walk up there, and 3 darts, just my first 3 darts, all in the bullseye, and I'm sitting there going like, oh, how the fuck and did I do that? And I turn around, they go, I thought you said you don't play much. And I was like, well, I had a meltdown at the World Championships 5 years ago, and I haven't thrown a dart since. And they're like, it progressively got way worse after that. It was just pure luck, and I was like, there we go. So, but they were all terrified, like, we got to play against this guy, and I was like, I had to go tell my buddy Dirk, I'm like, Dirk, this is gonna get exponentially
Out of
worse
control.
than what you just
Yep.
saw right now. Like, I've like played darts once in my life.
Mhm.
I'm sitting with Chuck Mawhinney and Carlos Hathcock at a place called Domino Farms, and we were talking about this exact topic. And Hathcock talks about a time in Vietnam where he shot a 50 cal and broke the fork on a bicycle that the local guy that they were targeting. So he fell down on the ground and had to scramble for it. And he goes, I was aiming for his head the entire time. And we laughed for 30 minutes because it was like, well, you're lucky you got it in the grid square. And he's like, yeah, I know. And how many times do we think back on something that we did that's now legendary that people still talk about, and you're thinking, if they only knew how much luck and how much light was in somebody's eyes during that recollection. That's great.
Yeah. When the myth becomes the legend, print the legend. Isn't
That's
that
it.
how that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, hey, you got to tell
Yeah.
your folks at Netflix. You got to tell them that I'm an expert on aliens, and so I would love to be on that show one time because I will do
Alien
that poofy hair
deception.
thing. Exactly, alien conception. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, we'll do that one. I was
Incep-
impregnated by an alien. I'm ready.
That's my
I'll
show.
testify to that. That's so
oh
funny.
my god.
Mhm.
Well, man, dude, I appreciate you coming on and talking about the stuff, and I know you don't do a lot of the podcasts and stuff, and I wasn't even totally sure on what we ended up talking about on here. I wanted to get you on to get your perspective because I respect it and appreciate it a lot, and man, like it was I think you broke contact when the book printed is what it was, right? I remember you like sent me a text or something like that, and then like it was nothing, and then you kind of broke contact with everyone, which I get. You had to kind of. I'm assuming there's a lot of blowback from this stuff that's some of it expected, some of it unexpected, some things I'm sure you're like, yeah, I figured this would happen, or some it's like, holy shit, I didn't realize this would happen. So sharing that stuff is really, it's really cool. It takes a lot, and it's a lot more than people think sometimes. And I just appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing some of the stuff, because I'm a big fan of Doug, and we always had an insane time together hanging out, and so it was good to reconnect, man. And so I'd love to we gotta hang out sometime if we're ever in the same area. But man, I really do appreciate you coming on the show, and I'll push the book out to everyone I know.
Hey, the
and
perfect
if
book for
there's-
Christmas. Think about it.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, if I will say this, then as far as like what you're doing and what your podcast is all about, I think somebody might watch this and say, these three were just rambling the whole time. They were just talking about the good old days or so on. But I think other people may look at it and see the format and realize I haven't talked to this guy Brian in 10 years. And this is the first time I'm ever meeting Greg. And look how easy this was and how comfortable we all were. And we're all kind of goofing around, and we're like having fun, and we're talking, and we're just being open and honest with each other. And to use that is because Brian, you and I established that trust very early on,
Yeah.
between you and I. It was
Yeah.
the idea of me, you, same. I don't need to lie to this guy. He doesn't
Yep.
need to lie to me. I know he's been there, done that. So have I. Great. Now let's both just be humans together. And
That's
so,
great.
talking to you over the weekend, that was for an hour. Great. But then here it's just like we just taught a course 2 days ago, it seems like.
Yeah.
Same with you,
It
Greg. I've
does.
obviously, heard stories about you and everything, and what you were up to. And now here we are meeting for the first time. I'm like, yeah, I've known this guy for 15 years. Yeah, of
Well,
course.
Doug,
Like,
I hope I'm not as big as a dick as they were leading you on to believe. So, because
they
it's a
said
pleasure
asshole.
meeting you.
No,
Oh,
they said asshole.
I knew it was one of those. There we go.
I mean,
That's so funny. That's so funny.
let's get it right.
So true.
Yeah. Yeah, man. No, it's funny. It was like that time that what I forget where we were at, and all of a sudden, like I'm like in the parking lot in the morning doing some stupid workout, and then like you're coming walking out with some other dude. I'm like, is that like what is this dude like following me? Or wait a minute, and then you're probably like, is this dude following me? Or, like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I wasn't going to tell that story, but
Yeah.
No, Marin's a fanboy. You can say that. I've never met anybody that Marin likes. So actually meeting you, Doug, and knowing that you've carried on a
That's
relationship for 10 years, honest to
that.
God, because he does not. It's just like with Shelley. It's like, what do you think of this guy? And Shelley actually looked at your bio and checked out the book and everything. And Shelley was like, oh, it seems like it's going to be a great guest. And it's been a blast. But like Brian's always like, lukewarm. And then with this, he's like, Doug Laux. So I'm very happy to finally meet you. And yeah, again, you know, your story is an easy one
true.
to tell. It's a great one.
I know that's me because like I'm like I don't get along with a lot of people. I tolerate everyone pretty much, but like I don't get along or create friends with a lot of people or want to have a drink with most people.
correct.
Usually I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go walk around the city by myself for the next 3 hours or
That is
something if we have
true.
free time.
Correct. Yeah, and
But
So
just
funny.
because you brought up the story, it didn't help that I was getting in the car at 7 a.m. with a colleague, and I looked
yeah,
to my left, and both of our first thoughts were, "Who the fuck is that guy?"
yeah.
Because you're in the goddamn parking lot of like
Yep.
some shitty hotel doing calisthenics. And I'm
Yep.
like, this guy looks like somebody I know who stretches like that. And then I got out of the car and I was like, there's no way. And you're like, oh, hey man, what's going on? Good to see you. And I
Remarkably,
was like,
almost exactly how I hook up at furry conventions. You know, I know somebody that stretches like that. No, that was Marin. We would be checking into some crappy hotel, and I see one guy doing one arm pull ups with his fingertips, and somebody looks and goes, "That looks like Marin." It is Marin. There's never been a time that
yes.
somebody said it looks like Marin, and it wasn't Marin.
And
So
it wasn't
so
me. Yeah,
true, so true.
Yeah, it was
yeah,
Well,
dude.
it's easy
Well,
when you're 5'1" and you weigh 90 pounds. That's what I'm saying. It's a little harder when I'm just
Oh,
saying.
I'm a solid 5'3", and
That's so true. The Christmas card is going around, Brian.
yeah.
mm,
Well, yeah, man, I appreciate it. And I thought it'd be cool too for some of our listeners that we have folks that listen to like every episode, so they kind of
Yep.
get like a little insight, a little behind the scenes of us because we sort of stay on more of like a specific topic, and yeah, we bring in our stories and stuff, but it's not really like old home week with someone that we knew from back in the day. So it's fun to catch up, dude. But yeah, man, I really appreciate anything else you got that they're working on coming up. Any other you can be on any more TV shows where I can point to people and say, hey, I know that guy.
hey, I'm doing that next season with him. Uh, yeah,
I haven't gotten there
hey,
yet,
you
but
know, I'm going to be in
eventually the story is going to be, well, they actually asked me to,
that.
but
Yeah, I had to decline. He's not doing so well, so I gave that to him. Yeah, I don't know. It's the holidays right now, so the entertainment industry is asleep. So I have
yeah,
no idea what's going on in that regard. Uh, so what I'm going to do next really is I've just kind of been sitting around for the past month. So when you reached out and wanted to do this, I was like, yes, that does sound good. Getting up before noon. Thank you for saying that earlier. Crack of noon. Dick. I mean, I could have jumped on the fact that we're both fans of Mean Girls, Greg, but I
Oh yeah.
didn't. I let that slide too, even though I could have did an hour on that. Uh,
yeah. I bring it up way too many times in class because it's one of my favorite movies, and I can tell
mhm.
the whole entire cafeteria scene can explains human behavior. I could teach a whole course just on that cafeteria scene.
Just do
Really.
that. See that girl? Just watch and do that. Just do that and dress like that too, all day.
I still do.
You have like
Thank you.
I can tell. It's nice. But
So yeah,
no,
man.
thank you guys for thanks for thinking of me, and I'm glad I did it. But I knew that this would go well. So thanks for Thanks for doing
Yeah.
exactly what I thought you would do.
Well, Doug, I
Yeah,
think it was an
man.
absolute
Well,
blast from my side, and I want to make sure that our paths cross again because it was a lot of fun talking to you. Like I said before we started recording, we probably chewed a bunch of the same territory and run into the same people. So it was just a pleasure finally putting a face and to the name and hearing your story. So it's been a blast for me, and I'm glad you and Brian allowed me in.
Thanks.
well, I appreciate it, man. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Of course, there's always more on the Patreon site, and reach out if you have any questions, folks. And don't forget that training changes behavior.